The studio atmosphere felt unusually volatile that morning, charged with the kind of anticipation that made even the camera operators stand a little straighter. Word had already spread through the corridors that today's guest wasn't just any celebrity but Tom Hardy, an actor whose presence alone could tilt the energy of a room. The producers had rehearsed their signals twice, the assistants whispered reminders of time cues, and the hosts prepared themselves with the talking points that usually kept conversations flowing. But Joy Behar, seated in her familiar chair with a cup of coffee cooling beside her, sensed something different too. She flipped through her cards but didn't seem to absorb a single word. Her instincts had already warned her that this conversation wouldn't follow the usual script. When Hardy finally walked onto the stage, applause rose like a sudden gust of wind. He gave a modest wave, nodding to the audience, his expression calm but unreadable. He carried himself like someone who knew exactly where every exit was, someone simultaneously present and detached. Joy leaned forward to greet him, her smile wide, her voice warm, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She recognized a challenge when she saw one. The beginning was harmless enough. Joy asked about his latest project, Hardy answered with understated charm, and the audience responded with quiet appreciation. But Joy wasn't satisfied with simple pleasantries. She pushed, inch by inch, nudging the conversation toward areas he rarely entertained publicly. First it was about the physical toll of his roles, then his family life, then tabloid rumors. Hardy offered polite but minimal responses. His stillness made her more determined, as though every calm answer was a personal dare. So, she said, leaning forward with that familiar glint, some people say you're a bit difficult on set. Intense. Hard to handle. What's that about? Hardy tilted his head, not offended, not surprised. Is that what they say? Well, you know, Joy continued, her tone teasing, you actors can be sensitive. Moody. Temperamental. The audience murmured, half amused, half uneasy. Hardy's mouth twitched in the beginning of a smile, not warm, but knowing. So we're going that way today? He asked. Joy blinked, momentarily thrown. What way? The way where you poke someone until they react, Hardy replied conversationally, as if discussing the weather. It's fine. Just tell me so I know what game we're playing. A few audience members gasped. The camera operator instinctively pushed in for a close-up. Joy tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out thin. No game, she insisted. Just conversation. Conversation, he repeated softly. That requires two sides listening. So far it feels like you're trying to corner me. I'm curious why. The air thickened. Joy opened her mouth, but Hardy wasn't finished. I'm here to talk about the work, he said. The craft. The reasons I wake up wanting to tell stories. If you want to ask about that, I'm all yours. If you want the tabloid version of me, I can't help you there. Joy raised her brows. People are interested in the human side too, Tom. And you've decided the human side is the rumors. He countered, still steady, still devastatingly calm. That's interesting. The audience shifted again, glancing between the two. Joy's fingers drummed against her note cards. She attempted a pivot to regain control, but Hardy didn't give her the space. Let me ask you something, he said gently. Is the point to understand the person, or to provoke a moment you can clip for later? She stared at him, and for the first time, she didn't have an immediate comeback. Her silence rang louder than any argument. Hardy didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply sat there, breathing in the tension with serene clarity. The control of the segment, usually firmly in Joy's hands, had slipped away like sand through fingers. Producers waved frantically behind the cameras, but the moment was beyond salvaging. When the break was called early, Hardy offered Joy a courteous nod, then stood and walked backstage as if nothing unusual had happened. Joy stayed seated, her jaw set, her eyes fixed on the floor, the weight of the exchange pressing down harder than any on-air clash she'd ever faced. And the audience knew, they had witnessed a moment where composure defeated confrontation, where calm dismantled chaos, and where Joy Behar, for once, had no words left. The tension backstage had begun long before Tom Hardy stepped foot onto the set. Runners whispered to each other as they passed, producers checked their watches too often, and the pre-show chatter carried an unmistakable nervous tremor. Something about Hardy's presence seemed to unsettle even the most seasoned crew members. He wasn't loud or demanding, quite the opposite. He was composed, silent, almost too calm, and that calmness radiated outward in a way that made everyone unsure whether they should brace for impact or admire the restraint. Joy Behar sensed it too. She sat at the host's table, pretending to skim her flashcards while the audience settled in, but her eyes kept drifting toward the wings. She knew Hardy's reputation: brilliant, intense, unpredictable in interviews, and not one to suffer shallow questioning. She had sparred with actors before, but something about Hardy's quiet presence suggested this wouldn't be a typical exchange. Still, Joy never backed down from a challenge. On the contrary, she saw them as opportunities for viral moments. The music cued, cameras angled in, the applause sign flashed, and Tom Hardy emerged. The moment he stepped into the light, the audience broke into enthusiastic claps. Hardy responded with a small nod and a soft, closed-lipped smile, as though grateful but slightly embarrassed by the attention. He took his seat, adjusted his mic, and waited. Joy inhaled once, long and measured, and began her introduction. At first, the conversation felt smooth, almost deceptively so. Hardy answered politely when she asked about his latest film, his preparation for the role, the psychological demands of playing morally complex characters. His voice was low and steady, each word chosen with intention. Joy nodded along, but her eyes carried that glimmer that meant she was winding up for something sharper. "So, Tom," she said, tilting her head, "a lot of people online say you're intense. Hard to interview, even. Why do you think that is?" Hardy paused, then offered a polite shrug. "I don't know. Maybe I'm shy." Joy smirked. "Shy? Come on. You've intimidated interviewers before." Hardy didn't return the smile. "Only the ones who expect a performance instead of a conversation." The audience stirred. A few chuckles escaped. Joy blinked, momentarily disarmed, before pushing further. "Well, people want to know the real Tom Hardy," she insisted. "Not just the actor. The man. And what version of me counts as real?" Hardy asked quietly. "The one my family knows, or the one the tabloids create?" Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, tabloids exaggerate. But rumors start somewhere." Hardy leaned in slightly, not confrontational, just focused. "And repeating them on television helps who, exactly?" That question landed like a dropped weight. Joy's eyebrows lifted, but she recovered quickly. "Look, viewers are curious. It's my job to ask what they're thinking." "Is it?" Hardy countered, his voice still gentle. "Or is it your job to get reactions?" A murmur rippled through the studio. Joy straightened. Her posture. She wasn't used to being the one questioned. "I'm not trying to provoke you," she said. Hardy nodded slowly. "Yet here we are." It wasn't the words that shook the room, it was the tone. Calm, factual, impossible to twist into hostility. Joy tried to pivot back to safer topics, but Hardy's earlier responses lingered in the air like smoke, impossible to clear. Every attempt she made to steer the conversation felt clumsy, mismatched, out of rhythm. "Let me put it this way," Hardy said eventually. "If you want to talk about my work, I'm here. If you want headlines, I think you'll be disappointed." A single, sharp silence followed. Joy looked down, then up again, visibly rattled. She forced a laugh, but it came out shaky. Even the producers behind the cameras sensed the shift. They signaled frantically for an early commercial break, something they rarely did unless absolutely necessary. The second the cameras cut, Hardy stood, shook Joy's hand with impeccable politeness, and exited the set. No drama. No raised voice. No theatrics. Joy remained seated, staring straight ahead. For the first time in a long on-air career filled with debate and confrontation, she had been dismantled not by aggression, but by calm truth. And everyone in the studio knew, they had just witnessed a moment that would echo far beyond the walls of that stage. The morning began like any other studio day, but the undercurrent running through the building was unmistakably different. Assistants rushed a little faster, producers whispered with a little more urgency, and even the lighting crew seemed unusually alert. Tom Hardy was on the guest list, and that alone changed the temperature of the entire environment. Not because he was difficult or unpredictable, but because he had a reputation for bringing an authenticity to interviews that often stripped away the usual safety nets. He didn't play along for the sake of entertainment. He didn't sugarcoat. And Joy Behar, known for pushing boundaries in her own right, was preparing to meet him head-on. As Hardy waited backstage, he stood with his hands clasped loosely, gazing at the floor with the quiet focus of someone centering himself. Every so often a producer approached him with notes or reminders, but he only nodded politely, absorbing nothing he didn't already know. There was something contained, almost coiled, about him, not tense, but deeply present. Joy watched him from her seat as the cameras were adjusted. She sipped her water, rehearsing a few questions in her mind, although she rarely stuck to planned prompts. To her, interviews were living things, shifting, breathing, feeding off energy. Hardy wasn't giving her any yet, and that in itself threw her slightly off balance. The stage manager counted down. The audience's applause sign flashed. And Tom Hardy stepped into the lights with the kind of unforced charisma that instantly drew eyes. He nodded to the crowd, smiled briefly, and sat down across from Joy. The air thickened with anticipation. The first few minutes rolled by smoothly. Joy asked about his latest role, his training process, the physical demands of his characters. Hardy responded thoughtfully, giving credit to his team, discussing his dedication to detail, and making the audience laugh once or twice with quiet humor. But Joy wasn't satisfied with keeping things light. Her instincts pushed her toward deeper, edgier territory. "So, Tom," she said casually, flipping her note card, "you've been known to shut down interviews. Walk out of them. Give journalists a tough time. Why is that?" Hardy didn't tense. He didn't blink. He simply regarded her with a calm, steady gaze. "Is that what you think happens?" he asked. Joy chuckled. "Well, it's what people say." "And what do you say?" Hardy countered gently. The audience leaned in. Joy wasn't expecting to be asked for her own view, she preferred staying on the offensive. But she recovered quickly. "I think actors can be sensitive," she said with a shrug. "Maybe too sensitive. And interviews just bring it out." Hardy nodded slowly, then tilted his head. "Or maybe interviews sometimes poke at things that have nothing to do with the work." Joy blinked. "I'm just doing my job, Tom." "Then let me ask," he said softly, "is your job to understand someone, or to provoke them?" The reaction in the room was instant. A low murmur, a few gasps, even a stifled laugh from the back row. Joy stiffened. She opened her mouth, searching for a quick retort, but Hardy continued before she could seize control again. "I came here ready to talk about the film," he said. "About the craft. But if the point is to get a reaction, then just say so. I prefer honesty." Joy's jaw tightened, though she kept her expression neutral. "I'm trying to give viewers what they want." Hardy smiled faintly. "Are you sure? Or are you giving them what you think will trend later today?" That line hit like a precision strike. Not cruel. Not loud. Just undeniably accurate. Joy's hand tightened around her cue cards. She tried to redirect the conversation, but every new question felt flimsy, offbeat, overshadowed by the previous exchange. Hardy had taken control without raising his voice, without breaking politeness, without any hostility, just pure unfiltered clarity. The producers behind the cameras exchanged panicked glances. One of them began waving urgently, signaling for an early commercial break. The tension was too heavy, too real to continue seamlessly. When the cut was called, Hardy stood first, offering Joy a courteous nod that somehow only deepened the impact of the moment. Then he walked off the stage with a steady stride that suggested nothing about the storm he'd inadvertently unleashed. Joy remained seated, staring ahead with an expression that betrayed both frustration and disbelief. She had faced many clashes on live television, but this one was different. She hadn't been shouted down or overwhelmed. She had been quietly outmaneuvered, her usual strategies rendered ineffective by someone who simply refused to play the game. And the audience knew it too. They had witnessed a moment that would replay endlessly, analyzed and debated, a moment where Tom Hardy didn't explode, but calmly dismantled the entire segment with precision and grace.